Every Nexus smartphone in the past has logically succeeded its predecessor. The Nexus 4 was better than the Galaxy Nexus, the Nexus 5 was better than the Nexus 4, and now we've got the Nexus 6. This smartphone is either better or bigger than the Nexus 5 in every way. So is this smartphone worth buying? I'm Ben with iTech Triad, and this is our video review of the Nexus 6. Now let's get this out of the way. The Nexus 6 is big, really big, but it's not as big as you might think. The Nexus 6 is about the same size as the iPhone 6 Plus and the Galaxy Note 4. It's only slightly bigger than both those phones, and it's really not that hard to hold. Don't get me wrong, this phone is really big, but it's not impossible to manage. At first it's going to feel like you're holding a tablet, but over some time, you'll most likely get used to the size and prefer it. Moving past the size, let's talk about the design. The Nexus 6 takes the design of the 2014 Moto X and blows it up. From the front-facing speakers to the camera to the curved back, this is the same basic design. The Nexus 6 does change a couple of things, but for the most part, it's the same phone, just bigger. Talking about design a little bit more, the glass on the front of the phone is curved at the edges, which has its upsides and its downsides. On the upside, it feels really good and complements the software, but on the downside, applying a screen protector is nearly impossible, especially if it's tempered glass. In fact, there are other design choices on the Nexus 6 that are also a mixed bag. For example, the curved back. On the upside, it feels great in the hand. On the downside, this phone cannot sit still on a table. Anytime you touch the phone when it's sitting on a table, it's going to spin and wobble back and forth and basically drive you insane. The story is the same on the other side since the speakers stick out a little further than the display. On the upside, however, it does mean that placing your phone down screen first is not always going to result in a scratched screen. Next, let's talk about that display. Now, as I said, it's huge, but what's great is that the small bezels around the phone keep it at a manageable size in the hand. Now, the display itself is a massive Quad HD 5.96-inch AMOLED panel that's good. It's not the best display in the market, but it's far from the worst. Its colors are vivid and surprisingly accurate for an AMOLED display, but the display doesn't come without issues. First of all, it's not super bright. Outdoor use, especially in the sun, isn't very reliable as the display can be pretty tough to see. Another issue is that in low brightness situations, the display on some units tends to turn pink. I had this issue on the first Nexus 6 I tried, as did a lot of other people. But on another unit, at my current unit, the issue is just not there. Now, the Nexus 6 was one of the first phones to have Android Lollipop, and it runs incredibly well. The software looks great on it, and there are so many features to talk about that it's impossible to talk about them all in just one video. Instead, I'm going to focus on just a few that matter most to the Nexus 6. One great feature only on the Nexus 6 and other AMOLED phones is Ambient Display. Not unlike Motorola's Moto Display, Ambient Display shows you the time and your notifications at a quick glance in a battery-saving way when your phone is sitting on the table or when you pick it up. Other great features like accessing your data usage easily, seeing notifications on the lock screen, and Smart Lock make this phone an awesome experience where the hardware and software complement each other. However, it's not all awesome. There's some major downsides to the software on the Nexus 6. One point is that the Nexus 6 doesn't really take advantage of its huge screen in any way at all. Now, unlike phones like the Galaxy Note 4 and the LG G3, which have multi-window and floating apps, the Nexus 6 doesn't have any of this. How you view that is up to you, but I see it as a disappointment, but not a deal breaker. The Nexus 6's software is the same as it would be on the Nexus 5, just bigger. To me, I see it as a little bit of a waste, but at the same time, it's a good thing. Next up, let's talk about performance. The Nexus 6 is rocking some of the best specs out there. We've got a Snapdragon 805 with 3 gigs of RAM, and that makes for a great experience when it's combined with the pure speed of stock Android. No matter what game or app I used on this device, I couldn't slow it down. Previous software versions did have some issues, but in 5.1, most of those issues were fixed. So what about the camera? The Nexus 6 has a 13 megapixel camera on the back that's pretty good. It's not amazing, but it'll definitely get the job done and produce some nice pictures at the same time. Pictures outdoors look great with plenty of clarity and detail, but indoor and low light shots aren't nearly as good. The camera could be much better, but it's definitely not bad, and it's certainly the best camera on a Nexus phone to date. Not that that's a hard feat to accomplish. Now, one thing I'd like to highlight pretty quickly is the front-facing speakers on the Nexus 6. They are pretty awesome. They aren't boom sound speakers like on an HTC One, but just taking the speaker and putting it on the front makes a huge difference. Go ahead and hear it for yourself. Now let's get on to the battery life. The Nexus 6 has a large 3220 mAh battery that gives you decent battery life. It's not going to last you a couple of days, but it'll last you a day. On average, the Nexus 6 gave him about 2.5 to 3.5 hours of screen on time over 15 to 18 hours. Now some days are better than others, but overall it's not going to be anything amazing. To remedy that, the Nexus 6 has a battery saving mode to get a little bit more battery life out of the last few percent, but I generally did not find myself using it for a couple of reasons. First, because it limits performance and makes the phone tough to use. Second, that orange. For some reason, Google decided that when you have battery saver mode on, you need these bright, ugly, and just painful orange accents on the status bar and navigation buttons. Now, another way that the Nexus 6 remedies its battery life is with the included turbocharger, which promises up to 6 hours of battery life from just a 15-minute charge. Now, the turbocharger is a pretty awesome addition to the Nexus 6. If you want to see exactly how much power you can get into this phone in 15 minutes, check out the time-lapse video that's linked down below in the description. Now, one more way the Nexus 6 makes up for its somewhat subpar battery life is with Qi wireless charging, and that's one of my favorite features of the phone, because it's built in and you don't have to buy anything separate to enable it. Now, not to go without noting, Android 5.1 definitely gives the battery life a bump, but I didn't really get to give it enough time to form an opinion before I made my review, but it should give you a noticeably better battery life. Now, one last thing I'd like to highlight about the Nexus 6 is something that not everyone makes a big deal about, but they should, and that's the band support. Now, an unlocked Nexus 6 supports just about every band you can think of, and that means it's going to work on just about any carrier, even Verizon. Now, the Nexus 6 will work on any US carrier and can now be purchased at any of them. This is a pretty huge deal because if you're someone who switches carriers, now you can just take the nano SIM you want for AT&T and stick it in the Nexus 6 and it'll work. And then you can take a nano SIM from Verizon and stick it in the exact same Nexus and it will work just the same. Now, I find that pretty awesome, and it's one of the reasons that I actually bought this phone. When I first saw the Nexus 6, I said there was no way I was going to buy this phone, but now a few months later, it's my personal phone. The Nexus 6 has a starting price of $649 for the 32GB model and $699 for the 64GB model. Now, both are available in white and in midnight blue. So is this phone worth buying? That's a tough call. If you want a big phone, yes. If you want front-facing speakers, yes. If you want fast updates direct from Google, yes. If you want a phone that is supported by just about every carrier, yes. If you want one of the best performing phones on the market, yes. However, if you put more value in battery life, your camera, or in features, then maybe not. There are a lot of phones that beat the Nexus in a lot of ways, but the Nexus 6 holds its own in the smartphone market, and it's definitely going to continue to be a great phone far into 2015. That's going to go ahead and wrap up our review of the Nexus 6, and we do hope you enjoyed it. If you did and want to continue to support this channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this one. Also, be sure to give the video a like, as it does help us out a lot, and be sure to share this video with your friends if you think they'll find it helpful. If you enjoy our content and you want to help us make even more of it, check out our Patreon campaign, linked down in the description. As always, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in our next video.